Welcome, Shannon, to my YouTube channel. So let's get into it. Shannon, how did the Jehovah's Witnesses come into your life? And if you want to share your story as a Jehovah's Witness.
Sure. So the witnesses came into my life through my uncle and my aunt, and then my grandparents, and then my parents. And so that family unit kind of became witnesses, and that's my mom's brother and sister and her parents. And so my dad's family, I never really knew a lot growing up because they always hung out on holidays. And this family, so I had witness family and I had not witness family. And my parents, me and my brother were young. I was 3, my brother was 1. My parents were just struggling to make ends meet, weren't in a super healthy dynamic relationship wise. And the witnesses just came in and promised healthy, happy family. And they loved that. They loved the hope that that gave them. So they became witnesses. And, that's how I was raised. I remember going to school and not celebrating any of the holidays. It wasn't really a big deal. I I don't know. It's so weird because you kind of get used to it, and and that's how it was for me. I was very used to being different. I was very used to standing up for my beliefs and and the meetings, were always boring. I wasn't too crazy about them. There's a lot of preaching, and I ended up to grow to really like that. I liked the preaching work. I liked pioneering. I liked being with the brothers and sisters. Um, Sometimes I think maybe it was a respite from my home life that could be really chaotic, and that felt nicer in a lot of ways. So at 15, I took a semester of Spanish in ninth grade, and I just loved it. It clicked. It just clicked in my brain, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So after that little class, and I was really over high school. I didn't like all of the time wastes, and I didn't really value what I was learning because I believed that God's kingdom was going to come and put an end to all this worldly knowledge. So I would retain, test, and dump. And it just so I started homeschooling, and I started going to the Spanish congregation. So I would go to, at that time, we had 3 meetings a week. I would go to 3 meetings an hour in one direction. A little Hispanic family would come by and pick me up, and they'd bring me to all the Spanish meetings. And then I'd go with my family to the English meetings. And I started auxiliary pioneering, and I was homeschooling myself. Everything was pretty much read it, test on it. So I did that. I'm pioneering. I'm like a nanny for another couple in the congregation. They have 2 young children that they're homeschooling. So 2 to 3 times a week, I would homeschool them in the mornings while the mom went to nursing school at the time. And so, yeah, I was a teenager. I'm pioneering. I get a little waitressing job. I honestly, I felt awesome. Like at 17, 18, I had my driver's license. I got it, I'm pioneering. So I'm like in a good standing in the Kingdom Hall. And we get invited to speak at a district convention, me and some of my friends. And we're like 17, 18 years old. And we drive like an hour and a half to go to this district convention. My friend's dad I just bought her a brand new 2007. So this is in 2007, brand new Honda Civic, and it was stick shift. And no one else knew how to drive it except for me. So I got to drive it there. And on our way back, as we were exiting on or coming onto the highway, at the highway, the speed limit's probably 70. And I went up and tapped 100, and I came back down. And the congregation that I was in, we lived out in the country. It was a whole bunch of boy teenagers, and they did a lot of racing. We did a lot of car racing on back dirt roads, yanking up emergency brakes, skirting around dirt road hairpin turns. And this congregation that I was in now was a little bit different. They were in the city, and it bothered someone in the car. It bothered their conscience when I did that. So they told the elders, and I ended up losing Pioneer School about 2 weeks before Pioneer School. So I had pioneered for a year and a half because I started in the middle of one year. regular pioneered that the end of that year, but didn't get to go because it wasn't a full year. So I pioneered another full year, and it's a couple weeks before I go to pioneer school. And the elders bring me into a back room and, ask me, did I go that fast? And reminded me about being blood guilty and just the responsibility of being a pioneer in the congregation. And, you know, the other people that were doing it, I don't think that people that were driving fast or racing, I don't think they ever counseled them because those people didn't really care. They weren't really in the witnesses as much, but I was. And because of that, I had to be an example, a lesson of what happens when you make poor decisions. So that really sucked. And I was really, really down and depressed. And I just felt like such a loser. And oh, the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment of all of the hundreds of people who knew I was going to pioneer school. And now I had to tell them like why I wasn't. It was so heavy, and I was not in a super great spot. And there was this guy that had been pursuing me pretty heavily, and I wasn't interested, but I didn't really know how to say no. And so I ended up dating him for a couple of months, and we had some makeout sessions, which I felt were kind of inappropriate. And so I was really scared that I was going to get disfellowshipped. And makeout sessions, I mean, this was not oral sex. This was not intercourse. These were makeout sessions. And I'm sitting over here freaking out, thinking that I might get disfellowshipped. So I just marry him, even though on the way there, I knew like it wasn't right. I also thought, well, my yes mean yes, my no mean no. Like I've already committed to saying yes. So I need to see this through. And he says he's going to love me and he wants to make me happy. So, I mean, what could go wrong? Like, that's all you want from a person, right? Little 18-year-old me. And so I married him, and I ended up going to the elders about a month after I was married. And I just felt so guilty. And I felt like, Jehovah knew. And that's what the introduction to the book I'm writing is about. So I'll save that maybe for the end. But I ended up staying married with this person for 8 years until I was from 18 to 26. And it was really difficult. It was really difficult. It was a very unhealthy marriage. I went to the elders a lot asking help, and I was met with, read the Bible more, meditate more, go out in service more. And like I was trying to do all those things to the max, but there would be this fire that would just come up in me, and it just would say things like, this isn't right. At one point, the abuse got so bad, this was before we had kids, that I kicked him out, and I didn't go to meetings for a month. And the elders a month later came to my house with him, and we all had a meeting. And I had a stack of papers, big old stack of papers. And I'm like, okay, so I've been doing some research and I've learned some things. I've learned the word gaslighting, and it means this. And these are the 17 times I've experienced this. And then this is another word. This is emotional abuse. And they took all my papers and they put them aside, and they said, that is worldly knowledge. And we're going to turn to God's word. And God's word says, what God has yoked together, may no man tear apart. And I remember I was just begging, pleading, please do not make me get back with him. Please do not make me get back with him. And at the end of the meeting, I said, if I end up dying and killing myself because I'm so depressed, I want you to hold yourselves, talking to the elders, responsible, because I'm literally begging to get out and no one will let me. And that was that. And then a few days later, I felt guilty. So I wrote them apology notes and put it all behind me, got back with my ex-husband, because it's kind of like the will had been beaten out of me. That she's like, okay, well, this is what I've done to my life. So now I've got to reap the consequences. And that's when I got pregnant, and I wanted to be pregnant so bad. And now looking back, I can see I just needed something or someone to almost keep me company. And a couple years later, I had another baby. So when my kids were 3 years old and 1.5, I love being a mom. I'm a stay-at-home parent. It's difficult to be a stay-at-home mom, and I wanted to have a job, but I was not allowed to. I also wasn't allowed to have people come and visit me at our house unless I had, his permission and stuff. So that was really difficult. It was really difficult. I felt really trapped. I felt like I had more freedom when I was 17, 18 years old, driving to district conventions, and just I had so much freedom. And slowly over these 8 years of marriage, my freedom was to where I was really trapped. And so I remember one day just looking at my kids and seeing them see us. And it was this realization of, oh my goodness, if this is what they grow up seeing, this is what they're going to think is normal and okay. And this is what I grew up seeing. And this is what I thought was normal, okay. And I don't even know what normal and okay is, but I really feel like this is not it. And so I borrowed $1,500 and I got an apartment. I paid the deposits and the electric and the oil, and I had zero money. And I had so much peace sitting in that empty apartment with my two babies. I was overjoyed. I was like uncomfortable with all the peace. I knew that this was right. I knew, like, no matter which elders from which congregations were going to try to pressure me to get back with my ex-husband, I just knew that I could not. Like, this was too valuable. And the elders were pressuring me a lot. That was really hard, but I stood pretty firm. And then about 10 days after I moved into this new apartment, and these 10 days are filled with, you know, a lot of trying to find childcare, trying to get childcare assistance, trying to get assistance in any way that I can, searching for jobs, applying for waitressing jobs, just trying to make it all happen so that I can pay next month's bills. Because that's about how far I had. I had 1 month and I had to be ready to pay the bills for the next month. And that is when a police officer knocked on my door. My youngest was napping, and my 3-year-old are sitting on the couch and we're reading books. And I opened up the door and she asked me, about my father, asked if John Thibodeau was my father. And I said yes. And she told me that he had passed away. And I just couldn't understand that. I was like, I don't know if this is a heart attack, a car accident, if he did hurt himself, because he had mentioned that. And my mind just went into total shock, and I couldn't ask any questions about what happened, because when I tried to, it acknowledged the fact that he was not there anymore. And so the only thing I could get out was no. And I just walked around my indoor outdoor area in a crazy 8 circle, just going no, no, no. And I don't know how long that was, but I know the police officer gave me my space and read books with my daughter, just kind of picked up there. And I called my father's wife and I asked, like, what happened. And I knew that she was alive when she answered the phone. And I knew that their relationship was very volatile. They'd only been married about a year. It was violent, it was abusive in ways that I'd never witnessed before. Some people, when they get together, they can just really bring out the worst in each other. And I saw that. And my father just felt like he didn't have a lot of hope. He felt really, I mean, he was my best friend. I talked to him every day. I talked to him the night before he died. I knew where he was at. I knew that, he had talked about hurting himself, but I also grew up hearing him talk about hurting himself and never did. And my mom had always told me, don't worry, people who talk about it don't do it. And so when I heard him talk about it, I'd say, oh, Dad, don't say that. And he'd say, I know, I would never do it. I'm just saying, that's how I feel. And that's a big reason why I'm writing my second book, This Ends Now, because I want to talk about that. I want to debunk a lot of myths that are out there around suicide and mental health. What does it look like to really show up for someone? And what is the deal with, suicide? Who ends up committing that? Who doesn't? What does that, like, what are those factors? And reading studies and digging into that more helped me to really see that religious trauma can be a very big factor. And he felt like a lot of guilt. This was his third marriage that would fail. There's just a lot there. And that his death really had me thinking. Do I want to go back to my ex-husband and get to a spot where I feel this desperate? Do I want to inflict this pain on my children? And if not, what does that look like? And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty good recap of my story as a witness.
Goodness, Shannon, it's so intense that that all happened in such a short period of time. And I know you said you grew up in a household with that kind of abuse. I know you mentioned you have a brother as well. So my question is, where is your mom in this situation, and what happened to your brother?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, my mom throughout my parents' marriage was very dissociated. She was anemic. She wasn't present very much. My father, it's an interesting story because growing up, the first 23 years of having a relationship with him was really difficult. I remember when I was 12 years old, we started going to a New Kingdom Hall, and I was nervous. We had been there once, and I knew there was like some boys around my age, and 12 is such an awkward stage, like, and I had on this dress and I felt like I looked pretty. And I asked my dad, like, do you think I look okay? And he said, baby, with a six-pack, you're a 10. And that was just like so hurtful. It was and because anytime I had a bid for connection, I just felt like it was never really met. There was a lot of sarcasm, there was a lot of protection and walls, and it was just it was a difficult family dynamic. And at 23, I was 23, I had my first baby, and my mom left my dad and she got disfellowshipped. She let me know. She said, hey, in about a week, I'm going to make a decision that's going to mean that I'm disfellowshipped. And I'm sorry, but be able to have any, I won't be able to talk to you. And that was so hurtful. My mom was leaving me. She was making a choice to leave. And I felt extremely abandoned. I had my first baby that we had spent an entire pregnancy talking about all the memories that we would make. And that was a very deep wound. And I did not talk to her for about 2 or 3 years. And, when she left my father, he really went into maybe rock bottom would be like a dark place, but also a place that really renewed him. Like he became a different person for the last 3 years of his life. And I'm so grateful that I got to witness that transformation, because it gives me the hope that no matter how old you are, no matter how ingrained ideas and thoughts are, you can learn to be different. And what that learning process looked like for my dad, what it sounded like in the very beginning was him saying, okay, I hear you're saying that I'm sarcastic a lot and that is hurtful. So when I'm sarcastic, I want you to tell me. And I just laughed. And I was like, absolutely not. Do you know what's going to happen if I tell you, Dad, that was really mean? That hurt my feelings. You're going to laugh, and then you're going to be like, oh, I can't say anything around here. Everyone's so sensitive. I might as well just never say anything. And he's like, okay, you're right. You're right. I do that, but I won't do that. So if I say something that's hurtful, I want you to tell me. And so I started saying things, and it got to the point where I didn't really have to say anything. I would just kind of look at him, and he'd look back and he'd go, oh, that was mean. Okay, I can see it. And seeing that self-development and growth and reflection, and to be able to build a friendship with him, with that being the foundation, was something that forever altered my life. I mean, we spent a lot of times walking, and I'd be pushing the baby stroller, we'd be carrying me in a little wrap, and we just talk about life and how we perceived it, how we wanted to grow and develop and evolve. And so that was really beautiful. And I was really close with my dad. And I was very close when he passed away. And I didn't know then what I know now, which is why I feel such a need to educate myself, because had I been educated about mental health and suicide more then, I would have said and done things differently. But when you have someone and you're not sure if they're going to hurt themselves or not, it can be really hard to know what to do, Because if I called the police, who do I call? The police, the hospital? Like, my dad would be so mad if an ambulance showed up at his house and he was like, Shannon, I just said that. I wasn't really going to do it. So, how do you decipher? And that's something that I'm really digging into now in my life and educating others. What do you do if you meet someone who's in, or you are that person, or it's someone that you love or a friend? How do you react to that? And the truth is, talking is one of the biggest things that you can do, is just talk to that person and let them share their feelings and be there for them, because usually those moments of intensity tend to pass. So after I left the witnesses, my mom, after I left, I got disfellowshipped. So I lost all friends, all family, everything that I knew. I'm out here in this world. And my mom kind of sees me sometimes to see the kids, but is very strongly and vocal about, how could you leave Jehovah? You were so spiritual. Look at what you're doing with your life. Like, look at what you're doing for your kids. There was a lot of guilt, a lot of shame, a lot of blame, and it's very difficult. And, one of the things that hurt me a lot was, she walked in, I had the flu and I'd asked her to pick up medicine, and she came over and she placed the medicine down. And she said, I just want to let you know that I bought a house like 6 hours away and we're moving because I cannot talk to you anymore. I love Jehovah more. My relationship with Jehovah means more. It is too tempting having you here, and you're, trying to call me and trying to text me and trying to hang out. And I cannot do this. And so this to me felt like a second, occurrence of a lot of abandonment, not to mention the disassociation during my childhood, which felt like a lot of emotional abandonment, needing someone to be there and just not having that person show up. And so she moves 6 hours away, and then she leaves the witnesses. So she starts to leave, and she's like navigating through what that looks like. And we're trying to have a relationship where we tend to be pretty close. But it got to a point where I noticed that every time I spoke with my mom, I suffered a lot mental health wise. I was suffering. Just I it's hard to explain, but it led me to the point where I had to completely cut her out of my life. And I think this is an important issue when we're talking about Jehovah's Witnesses and disfellowshipping, because although I believe that disfellowshipping is wrong, I do not believe that choosing to not associate with certain people in your life is wrong. There's certain, and at that time with my mom, I think that we were both in places where our type of relationship was very hurtful, and it just was not productive. And it felt like every time I interacted with her, I would move backwards instead of forwards. And so I took about 2 years where I did not speak with her. She lived, away, and I focused on myself and my own healing. I had a lot to do with parenting my inner child and showing up for myself in the ways that I needed and never received. And eventually coming to a point where I understood my mom in a different way. I saw her more detached from me, instead of everything that she had to say meaning something towards me. And there's so much Jehovah's Witness baggage, even when we both left, that just still encumbers all of these interactions. And it took that 2 year break. And now we've been talking for, she's moved back down here. We see each other regularly. We talk regularly. We've had a lot of healing conversations. And I feel really lucky that I got to heal the relationship with my father before he passed, and now to heal the relationship with my mother while she's still here. And I get to show up as my authentic self, and she gets to show up as her authentic self. And that doesn't mean that things are perfect, but it means that we've learned how to have conversations that matter and how to consider each other and respect each other. And that has just been a game changer. So I'm really thankful, because a lot of people that grew up as witnesses don't get to have that type of healing and repair. And I feel very, very thankful for that.
What a beautiful round whole relationship that you had from your mom, from her abandoning you twice and you gaining that. Now you have a good relationship with her. So your story kind of left off at 26, your dad passing and leaving the organization. what in the last 8 years has happened, if you can just kind of catch us up with that.
Yeah. Okay. That's a lot. It's a lot that's happened. I'm gonna try to do it chronologically. I mean, when I first got out, I was just so confused. I could not tell up from down. My entire world, existential crisis, I didn't know right from wrong. I had to go back. It felt like I broke down every piece of myself and had to take it out and look at it and say, was this me? Or is this something that I collected from society, from religion, from family? Is this something I want to keep? Is this something I want to give away? And so I started identifying these core values and beliefs, and some of them, tie into how I was raised as a witness. So things like 1 Corinthians 15:33, that's something that I still believe in. Bad association spoils useful habits. I believe, and based on the things that I've learned and read, that we are who we hang out with. So if we're hanging out with people who aren't in alignment with what we want, it's okay for us to say, I'm going to go in a different direction and I'm going to take space from this. Um, so there was a lot of learning and healing. I'm waiting tables. I'm learning about drinking. I'm smoking weed, trying it. Like I have every other weekend that I'm kid free. So every other weekend, I'm kind of learning this worldly life. What are the options out there? Who are the people? And it's really difficult. This is really difficult being such a naive, closed-minded individual and just being plopped into the world, no education, very little life experience. I had to learn a lot of things the hard way. I had to learn about people just by being betrayed, being deceived, being lied to understand more of that. I worked consistently with a counselor very regularly throughout those 8 years because I was like, I think I probably need help. Like my dad just died by suicide. I'm going through a divorce. I just got disfellowshipped. I probably need some extra hands on deck. And the first thing my counselor talked to me about was boundaries and assertiveness. And that was just no way. I remember looking at her and saying, I can't say that. She said, well, of course you can. No, I can't say that. She said, well, of course you can. That's what you're thinking. That's what you're feeling. So you're allowed to say that. That's just rude. Like, oh, and now I feel just really confident in my boundaries. I love having them. They are so protective. They're not to, keep people out. They're just to keep me safe. And that was such a valuable lesson. Over the past 8 years, I read a lot, hundreds and hundreds of books. It's so cool not being a witness and not having to just read witness publications. So I have hundreds of books that are surrounding me right now. You can see some of them here. That was huge in my own development. And after waiting tables, I speak Spanish fluently. And someone had told me that there's an immigration law firm that needed a bilingual receptionist. And I was terrified to take that job. Would I hate a 9 to 5? Oh, it just seems so scary. And I took it anyways. And I didn't want to wait tables forever, but I had no education. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I got that job. It turned out not to be the right work environment for me. So I switched to another law firm and I started managing that small law firm. And it gave me the flexibility that I needed to show up better with my kids. And then I got another job managing a much larger law firm that gave me more flexibility, but was also still pretty demanding. And COVID hit, and I knew my children needed me more than I was being there for them. So I left that position and I ended up going with a nonprofit. And that gave me more flexibility, but still wasn't quite the right fit. And I felt so embarrassed because I'm like, oh, I've switched jobs like once a year for the past 6 years. And I was worried that maybe that meant something about me, but I couldn't deny my desire to find what was truly in alignment. And I remember waiting tables and dreaming, like, what if what we did for work didn't feel like work? Like, what if it was, what we wanted to do? What if we got paid to do what we wanted to do? And I'd like print out receipt papers and I'd start writing these ideas and I'd share them with my coworkers and be like, yeah, good luck with that. I hope that goes well for you. And so after the last job position, I found where I'm at now. I've been here for over 2 years. I have unlimited paid time off, which has been incredible for my own mental health and recovering from toxic work environments and all the baggage from all of the things. Like sometimes they hit me and I need to take the day and I don't have a good reason for it. And to be in an environment with someone who, the leader of our company has done so much healing and work on herself that she provides a very safe environment for me to do my best professionally and also take care of myself personally. So that's kind of my trajectory, like work wise, and where that's led me, which was a big deal because when I left at 26, I felt like I had nothing to offer the world. And I just dreamed of this life where I could make money doing what I love. And now I get to work with nonprofits. And at 26, I felt like, wow, the witnesses just threw me in the world with nothing. I have no experience, I have no education. But now I realize so many of those skills that I developed, the pioneer school that I went to, the TMS school, like all of that did give me a lot of abilities and skills that I'm able to translate to raise money for nonprofits who are, maybe it's for a diversity center that's supporting LGBTQ plus. Maybe it's a homeless shelter for people who, for whatever reason, have been kicked out of their community. And that work is so rewarding and so satisfying. And there are so many different aspects of my life that are in alignment for who I really want to be and the type of children that I want to raise in this world, that I feel very grateful for that every day. And I want people out there who might just be going through it and might be in the thick of it and might not be able to see the way out. Like I remember that, I feel that, feel it, and then move on, find the way forward because there is always a way forward. And yeah.
Absolutely. I love your positivity and all of the words that you said. And I really admire all the reading that you've done because I think knowledge is power, and it's empowering to be able to read whatever you want to read. I know as a witness, if you were reading something that was fiction or something with psychology or whatever it was, you felt guilty if maybe you didn't study for the meetings or the, like you said, the worldly kind of knowledge that the elders had told you that you were researching. So it's fantastic just to be able to read whatever it is that you want to read and have all that knowledge behind you. And what an incredible story, Shannon. I really just blown away on so many different parts of the story. But without further ado, again, I want to ask, is there anything that you feel that you missed out on that you want to add to this interview?
Yes, I would love to share about my books. So I'm writing a few books. I'm not talking publicly about the third one because it's just, you have to wait and see. But the first book that I'm writing about is called Cult Life. It's a memoir of growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. I just started writing it, definitely not available for publishing or anything like that. But my goal with this book, if you'd like to follow me on Facebook, it's Cult Life, a memoir of growing up as a Jehovah's Witness. And with this book, I want to share the journey of writing it as it happens, because it's been seeing other people's journey in my local writers group that's inspired me to tell my story and believe that it's possible for me to publish a book. And I want to share my story in hopes that it will help others take more ownership of theirs. I felt so ashamed that I was stupid enough to be a Jehovah's Witness. That's was my thought pattern. And I felt embarrassed to let anyone else know that I was like involved in this cult. And now I've come to understand the why. Like when you're growing up and that's the only thing you know. I have so much more love and compassion, even for the ways that I showed up that I wasn't super proud of. So Cult Life is going to be a memoir of this first 26 years. And it's going to cut off right as, I'm going through the divorce. My father dies by suicide and I get disfellowshipped from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I want the question to kind of be, and then what? Then what happens? And that's where book 2 is going to pick up. And book 2 is called This Ends Now. It's inspired by my father's suicide. And so it's really in reference of, it's kind of like this bullshit ends now, like this abuse and this not taking care of our mental health, like this ends now. I am the cycle breaker. It will be different from here and for my children. And so what does that look like? And this book is going to be much harder. The first one is a story of a life I once lived, a previous life. It's really not hard for me to write about my witness story. I didn't suffer any sexual abuse, which I think is a contributing factor of maybe why it's not so difficult. Well, I guess in the way that most people do, I don't know. But that is just a story to tell. The second one is really going to be vulnerable. To me, it will feel very embarrassing. There'll be a lot of work that I have to do to own my own learning out of the witnesses. Developing the knowledge and wisdom that I did was not always from a book. It was from a lot of mistakes. And I want to share that. And I want other people to know, if you're breaking cycles, you don't just wake up one day and go, oh, I don't want to yell at my kids anymore. I'll just stop that. Like, no, this is probably a generational cycle. Maybe your mom did that to you. Maybe your grandma did that to her. How many generations back did that go? And what is it really going to take to break it? And guess what? You're going to yell at your kids. Once you want to break a cycle, you don't just get to snip, snip, and it's broken. So what is it like to revisit our own mistakes, things that we know we want to change, but maybe we're having difficulty doing that? How do we work through that? And I want people to know that breaking generational cycles it isn't just this pretty little, I'm a hero. It's sitting with your shadow side. It's getting real with yourself and with your family dynamics. And I have an intro to my book. Can I read that? Okay. So this is the introduction to my book, Cult Life. And it'll probably take me about like 4 minutes to read. Is that cool? Yeah. Okay. It is October 2007. I sit in the back room of the Kingdom Hall in Charlottesville, Virginia. The room is lined with hundreds of books published by the Jehovah's Witnesses. The weekly congregation meeting starts out there. The blinds are closed and the meeting in here begins. I just turned 19 and have been married for about 1 month. I'm very worried because based on the information I've been trained on since infancy, some may call this brainwashing, I think I may have committed uncleanliness or fornication before marriage with my now husband. This fear was the primary motivation for us to get married after dating for only 2 months. We never had intercourse or oral sex, but our makeout sessions were inappropriate, and I knew that. The worry, the shame, the guilt of knowing that nothing can be hidden from the only true God is unbearable. It's keeping me up at night, and I know that the only pathway to forgiveness with Jehovah is to show my repentance before the elders. So I confess my sins, and a judicial committee is formed. Here's some key background information you'll need to know in order to fully understand the situation I've found myself in. A judicial committee consists of 3 elders anointed by Jehovah's Holy Spirit, which helps him to decide about the discipline needed when someone does something wrong or shows signs of not following the rules. Here's how it works. Jehovah's Witnesses are trained to report to the elders if anyone sees or hears about a sin made by themselves or others. The elders then investigate the situation carefully to find out what exactly happened. They talk to the person who committed the sin and ask questions. If the wrongdoing is serious and the elders perceive that the person is not sorry for what they did, the elders have a special private meeting called a judicial hearing. There, they talk more about the wrongdoing and why it was wrong. After turning to Jehovah's Holy Spirit for guidance, the elders make a decision about what to do next. When someone is found guilty of a gross sin or wrongdoing and doesn't show convincing works of repentance, the elders may decide on a disciplinary action called disfellowshipping. This means that a simple and sterile announcement is made in front of the congregation that sounds like, Jane Doe is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Families cry, everyone looks down, and if the wrongdoer is truly repentant, they will attend the meeting. At the end of the meeting, and until an announcement is made reinstating that individual as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, no one in the congregation is allowed to speak to, look at, or in any way communicate with the wrongdoer, because they have shown themselves unrepentant and undeserving of Jehovah's righteous discipline. All of this is determined by the person's meeting with the Judicial Committee. So yeah, tonight is kind of a big deal. I feel extremely uncomfortable. How much will I have to share to show them my repentance? I wonder if anyone in the regular congregation can hear our conversations. I hope not. I mean, it's already embarrassing enough. Everyone knows you're only brought into the back room during a congregation meeting if it's a big deal. Deep breath. I began to reason with myself that I am only reaping the consequences of my own actions, and I need to humble myself to receive the forgiveness I need for my sins. The elders opened the meeting friendly and thankful that I'm following the process Jehovah has put in place for his people. I tell them I may have crossed a line, but I'm not sure. They read me the faithful and discreet slave's definition of uncleanliness and fornication from the Jehovah's Witness publications. The faithful and discreet slave represents God's direct communication to his earthly organization, also known as a group of 7 dudes that run the JW cult. After the definition is read, they begin to ask me a series of questions. My face starts to feel warm with shame and embarrassment. The room feels stuffy and hot. I do not want to be here right now. They ask, how many times did this happen? Where did it happen? Did anyone else see you? Did you touch each other over top of your clothes or underneath? Did you climax? Did he ejaculate? How many times? I'm not really sure if I climaxed, and I feel dumb for not knowing. I hope I just didn't lie. I hope I don't have to repent for that sin too. My sins seem like a never-ending hamster wheel sometimes. With every question, I feel myself sinking deeper into the quicksand of shame. I wish they would stop. Don't they know enough already? The questions go on and on. I've been in this meeting for over an hour now. Some of the questions seem repetitive, like they're prying for more details. They're asking the same questions, but in different ways. It feels like I'm being interrogated. This feels wrong. I feel violated. There's a fire that starts to burn within me, a fire that could destroy this entire building and everyone inside of it. Without thinking, I say, look, I've answered all of your questions. I'm the one who came to you and confessed something really embarrassing. You have enough information to decide whether I'm repentant or not, but I'm not answering any more of your questions. And I walk out. Shoot. The people in the back probably heard me. I feel simultaneously livid and ashamed. My inner voice reminds me, good Christian women don't speak to God's chosen representatives that way. I hope I don't get disfellowshipped. I don't want to be kicked out, and I don't want everyone to know what I've done. And that's it.
Wow. I've said wow so many times, it's ridiculous now. But I love listening to audiobooks, and I felt like I was listening to like a New York Times bestselling audiobook right now. That was fiction. So the fact that it's nonfiction, it's more of a memoir, unbelievable. And I also really appreciate how descriptive you were with the organization's terms. So if you are somebody that wants to read this book that has zero idea about the Jehovah's Witnesses, besides the fact that they knock on people's doors, this is really descriptive and very also open, and your energy is just, it really, really lives in the book. And I hope you are able to make this into an audiobook, because you're an amazing, charismatic reader as well, Shannon. So phenomenal. Not everyone is a good storyteller, and then that with that percentage, not everyone is a good writer in that storyteller. So your percentage is really small. So I just really commend you on your writing, and I know your book is going to be a really, really good seller. So I'm going to put the link to your Facebook profile in the description notes, because if you were captivated like I was, which I know everyone that's listening right now is going to be super captivated. So thank you so much. I know you said it was 4 minutes, but such a good way to end this interview, Shannon. super excited to hear what people are going to say. And I know this is the first time that you've like publicly read your book out loud. So I feel honored to have you on, and I so appreciate you being here. And yeah, thank you again, Shannon. I really appreciate this interview.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the space that you're creating. There's a lot of healing when we can share our stories, and I'm just really glad that you're doing this. So thank you for having me on.
Absolute pleasure.